Sahanavavatu Sahano Punatu Sahaviryam Karavavahe Tejasvinavaditam Mastoma Viddhishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great energy. May we engage in our studies with a sense of illumination. May we not unnecessarily quarrel with each other, and peace, peace, peace be unto all. So we are here for Vedanta Series question and answer. There are no questions, there are no answers, so I will pause. And bear in mind this is interactive, so you can feel free to interject, ask any questions, make any comments as you please. So I'll wait for a few moments to see what questions arise. When we do meditation workshop, probably our starting point that we use during the workshop is to have a silence like that and to assess how comfortable people are with the silence. Some people are okay with it. Other people find a kind of awkwardness about it. And I wonder, why is that? See, there are some obvious actions that we can take that have obvious repercussions. A kind of counteraction that takes place. For example, if we light a fire, then the air immediately above it becomes warm and it rises. That we can see very easily. But what we can't see is that when it rises, cold air comes in underneath it and replaces it. When we talk about existence itself, in any sense, we have to take into account a totality. So in a changing world that we call nature, whatever action happens, some reaction is there to take its place, and we can measure it. There are some other obvious things that we can see which are longer term. That's a short-term thing. Longer term things are there also. Let us take, for example, our environment. We can see how we have an impact on our environment, negative impact on our environment, of course. Even from several thousand years ago, when man took up a pastoral lifestyle, maybe even 6,000 years ago, in some places in Africa, you can see cave paintings. You can catch artifacts from that period of time, 6,000 years old, made from the local animals which are in the environment. For example, shields are there, made from hippo skin in Tanzania. And then there's a curious substance that is used for rock paintings. To this day, nobody really knows what it's made from. Sometimes people think that there is maybe some animal blood, but it's not entirely like that. Otherwise, all the cave paintings would have washed away over 6,000 years. That was used 6,000 years ago and more. We wonder what was the life at that point. We take it that it was something like hunting and gathering. But at some point in man's history, some agricultural revolution takes place. For example, in Ireland, on the west coast of Ireland, it was all forests and swamps. But now it's green fields, occupied by sheep grazing on the pastures, and sufficient agricultural land to plant cereal food. The whole of human digestion had to change. The whole landscape changed. What was the repercussion from there? Can we easily measure it? So we now leave it to climatologists who have sensitive instruments to see what effects are there long term, and is it in our favor or otherwise. But regardless of whether it is short term or long term, there's a law of cause and effect. What do we might call sowing and reaping? What we call, in one word, karma. That's all easy to measure. But the impact of thought, how would we measure that? Supposing somebody has a thought that is deliberately defensive. Supposing I smash a rock or some stone, I can't imagine that all the elements will conspire to assemble and have a repercussion of knocking me, hitting me. All the stones gather together. The Swami hit the stone, broke it to pieces. Now we'll assemble and wait for a suitable moment and hit the Swami on the head. Something like that. But when we kill an insignificant creature, in our opinion anyway, a small insect or something, what will be the repercussion of it? So we know that internally there's a repercussion, because our attitude toward birth, life, and death can be elaborated and expanded so that we can fight nations and kill people with the same remote feeling, or lack of feeling, you might say, that it's all right, nothing will happen to us. A thought goes out, as it were. We think of it in a funny way. We think when we curse something or somebody, a bolt of lightning comes from the forehead. Or when we bless something, then maybe a dove floats out. That kind of childish concept we have. But all of the religions of the day will tell us that what we think, translated into actions also, will have some repercussion on us. And we don't know how long it will take for that to come back to us. And there's no way of measuring it also. So are we correct in assuming that every thought, every intention, every inner shift and movement will have a corresponding action on us physically, psychologically, and also in our own environment? And it strikes me we don't pay much attention to it. So if we have an eye for it, we can see that everywhere we can catch a kind of inner beauty, which in careless moments we lose. So is it that in those careless moments, where some other thought takes place, we are sowing the seeds of our own destruction? And will that have a consequence for the whole of humanity? So these are some important questions that we can consider. Now, if we consider things in the context of individualities, and a lifespan maybe that will last only 100 years, and we don't care what happens after that, then maybe we have misunderstood. Maybe we don't care about the environment, because if I'm now in my early 70s, and I estimate maybe another 20 years to go, then once the body dies, I don't care about the environment anymore. It doesn't affect me. Or maybe I have some consideration that children and grandchildren and all those younger generation being born today will be suffering from it. Maybe there's an element of compassion that comes into me to be concerned about that. And then maybe I'll think about doing something, because they have to live a 100-year lifespan. Will I not do something of an unselfish nature? Or I can shift my position completely and think that this is a totality. Nothing to add, nothing to take away from. Supposing I'm able to shift my attitude like that, this would be the point of view of Vedanta. Vedanta would have to bring you to a point where you come to a conclusion, oh, there's a totality. And in a totality, we don't have any question about, are there any deficient points of view? Are there any deficits? Are there any gaps? Is there something I have to do to supplement a position? That doesn't arise. So in a conversation yesterday, it's like examining life as if it were a television picture. You can see if there's a pixel there. Somebody told me in the COVID lockdown, said, I'm watching much more television now. The whole screen. Of course, they were joking, but that's our tunnel vision. Very often, we're seeing a series of small disconnected events, seemingly disconnected events. But when we step back, we can see the entire picture. It makes some sense. Step back a little, we see some connected colors, like seeing a jigsaw puzzle with 1,000 pieces. We see a corner of blue, a different kind of blue. One is evidently blue sky, but the other one is blue water. If we can get these confused, we're in for a mismatched puzzle. So we are in a kind of puzzle in the sense that what we call Maya is inscrutable. Science is the investigation of Maya. And no wonder they won't get to the end of it. No wonder it raises more questions than it answers. Because according to our Shastra, it says that this world, this Maya, is inscrutable. As soon as we try to catch it, it escapes us and raises another question. It's not meant to be fully understood because it's a vacillating thing in a state of continuous flux. One great principle in Buddhism about the world and nature that all Buddhists agree on is that existence, whether it is material existence or whether it is ideation or idealization, is all in a state of flux. Idealists have a flux of ideas. Materialists have a flux of materials. But all agree on the fleeting nature of nature itself. Is there something we can fix upon where we see some totality? And when we see the totality, then will it provide us with practical answers about the difficulties of individualities? From our point of view of the environment, it's an individuality. We are looking at it from where we stand. Do we have the possibility of shifting our position, seeing it from a fresh point of view, which will be overall more helpful? How will we measure a thought that goes and its impact on us sooner or later? Accept the whole law of reciprocity, that whatever action happens, whatever movement occurs, will have its repercussion on the understanding that there's a limitation. A limitation means that if I have a pond somewhere and I dabble my fingers in it and create a local ripple around the fingers, sooner or later it will be felt on the other side because of a boundary. Whatever is finite presents us with a boundary, and it means whatever happens within that scope will affect everything everywhere. Is there some strategy, therefore, I can use that will benefit everybody? Will good and holy thought change everything? Change cruelty in the world? Change all the negativity in the world? Well, yes, but primarily it affects me. That's the primary lesson. And when it affects me, and I systematically cultivate the noble values, then I make a reformation in my subconscious mind. It becomes more of a solid, healthy habit that has a suction power, and that is able to make a reformation. So indirectly, I'm affecting everything. Every holy person, even sitting in a cave, disconnected with everything else, issuing thought after thought after thought of the supreme positivity. See the Vedic prayer, may noble thoughts come to me from every side. Supposing there's a prayer like that, and wherever I look, whatever I hear, in other words, whatever the senses engage in, and whatever direction I shift my thought, will always arrive at a blissful base, some area of beauty in everything. Supposing I'm able to cultivate that, the individual life will be reformed, but it'll have its effect on the sum totality also. That is the benefit of leading a holy life. Leading a holy life means that you become like a lamp that has the capacity not just to light up a local area, but transform the whole environment by virtue of a subtle influence contained in that small substation that gets connected to the whole cosmos, the vast totality of existence. So we may have good intentions about changing the whole world, making everybody ecologically sensitive, and making sure that we don't have global warming and all of those key issues. But that would be a mistake. We have to take our own unit, as it were, and see what useful thing can be done, what game of guiding thought I can play in such a way that I get an internal transformation. And with that internal transformation, it has a positive effect everywhere. I become like an open channel for divine grace to flow equally to everywhere. All self-centeredness and selfishness will get removed. So that's the advantage of, practical advantage of what we call spiritual life. A change in attitude and thought that shifts the subtle areas that we know we cannot specifically measure, but we know that overall the impact is there, and on an individual basis we can measure it because we know where we stand. We know what our mental field looks like, and we also know that whatever movement happens there will have a reactive element to it. Some change will be there. You can't avoid it because of the finite nature of things. Then if I take a transcendent position, and from that blessing advantage, bless the whole world, it should have an effect. Why? Because nature comes in a hierarchy of elements. Not that any one is separate from the other one. Don't forget, it's a sum totality. I was making a little fun yesterday when I come across people who get involved in Occidental arguments. What do we mean by Occidental arguments? Arguments that emphasize the individuality of things, not the collectiveness nature of things. So there's a mistake that comes out in dialectics. That is that, particularly in America, by the way, that there are a body of people who say There's a theological stance of creation. There's a creator and something that's created. Completely unscientific, because nothing in science happens from outside. Everything has to happen from inside. Swami Vivekananda gives some funny examples. An apple falls. In the ancient days, you might have assumed some ghost was in a tree and was throwing apples at you. But we know now that that's not true. There's such a thing as gravity. Gravitational force, combined with the inherent corresponding nature of the apple, makes apple fall, and then a generalization. One or two apples falling, all apples must fall from trees. That generalized formula and that aspect of the internal nature of something, these two things combined, will make us understand something. The one provides us with a chain of causal connections going back to the highest generalizations, which will necessarily be more subtle as we find out primary causes on the way. Because every preceding cause must be more subtle than the effect. Until we understand that, nothing is gained anywhere, because cause and effect are the same thing, and leads us to some totality. You can compare it to an ocean, and then every wave will be causal or will be effectual. One wave comes up and creates a peak. That's the cause of the next hollow. The next hollow is the cause of the next peak, and so it goes on. But what is the substantial nature of the ocean? That totality. People who know that will have a different kind of assertion. You thought you were a small wave being bashed here and there, with a causal connection that if we do good, then good comes to us. There's no doubt that law is there. But that law is there in a limited way. Another thing is also there, the ocean itself, the actual substance of something. So that when we consider this totality, we can see the localized version, which has a causal law involved in it. And then we can see the vast ocean behind it, erupting in this way, which is infinite, unlimited. Our vision is only on the surface. When we get to the ocean itself, when we've mastered that understanding, we can steer our thought anywhere with great confidence, knowing that would arrive as we wanted it to, asserting values, all the noble values we can muster, so that the world looks different. If we're able to sit on God's royal throne and see things as He, then we can agree. We can see that everything is made in that entity's image and likeness. Sitting on the Lord's royal throne, from that advantage, things look different. That entity, that creative impulse, made the world and saw that it was good. The other side of it says, no, it's all bad. The wrong way of looking at it. We didn't shift our point of view to sit on the royal throne and have a blessing attitude from there, asserting all the values of strength and beauty and goodness and love and harmony, and seeing that everywhere. And why should we notice these positive aspects, such as beauty, if the underlying substratum is not beauty itself that comes through? If everything is blissful, that explains why a dog wags its tail when you come home. It's happy. This happiness is there for all kinds of species, indicating that the undercurrent is exactly that. If the undercurrent is joy and bliss, then it comes out behaviorally. It's not a mystery. then we should have a different coloration in our view. We should see the inherent beauty wherever we look and deliberately cultivate that way of seeing things, reforming then the internal habit level, and by its turn, reforming the totality also. Seeing the beauty everywhere, the world becomes beautiful for us. And it has the impact of a transforming effect, immeasurable, no doubt. But we are sure that it happens, sure that it is there. All these movements are there, well intentioned, no doubt, to change things. But things are not in an incorrect or a non-totality way. Things are not absent. There are no gaps, no spaces. It's not that we are dealing with a deficit. We're dealing with a fullness. And the attitude that things have to be corrected itself will give us a difficulty. It will give us instability. We can shift our attitude and say, no, everything is actually perfect, full and free. I see a totality there. Oh, totality standing there. Let me engage in adoration and worship, thankfulness. Indirectly, a transformation takes place. It's called spiritual healing. A man like Jesus was able to do it. The blind saw, the deaf heard, the lame walked, the dead awoke, because he's not thinking of any deficit or defect. Oh, what a pity, let me make a correction. We try and change it. Rather than standing where God stands or sitting where God stands in a position of fullness and blessing from there. Thanks for creating this opportunity for me to issue the divine scent of blessing. Not cursing that is defective. Blessing that it is full. So that I would change my internal way of thinking and speaking of things. Instead of saying, what a pity, what a pity. What a disaster, what a disaster. I'll say, what a glory, what a glory, what a blessing. So practical Vedanta is a question of shifting the attitudes based on sound philosophy, well-reasoned philosophy, matched by a feeling of truth that creates an internal shift in us and becomes something like a magnetic pull, pulling resources and things and people and places and new adventures into our life that match our thought. The matching movement has to come. Just as I say, when we light something, we know predictably air will rise. But what we haven't observed is cold air comes in. The unseen matching movement, we have to be sure that it will be there, but may not be noticed. And we can't take it for granted. So this is what is called karma, the principle of karma, sowing and reaping. Just because we cannot see what the consequence might be, do not think that there will be no repercussion or matching movement. There will always be a matching.